Vivek, good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. By the way, I love your backdrop. Listen, I was in Congress and running for Congress when the IRS under Barack Obama was targeting conservatives. It seems like they're back at it again. And I'm outraged that Janet Yellen, who oversees the IRS, and this story's been out for days, has no idea that the IRS was actually at Matt Taibbi's door, paying him a visit as he was talking and testifying about the weaponization of government.
You know what? I'll tell you, to be really honest about this, I believe her that she didn't know, because many of the people who run these administrative agencies, whether under Democrats or Republicans, are just puppets that sit on top of a deep state that is deeply politicized. And I think one of the things the next U.S. president needs to do, I'm up to the task, it's why I'm running, is to take a politicized agency like the FBI, like the IRS, and be willing to shut it down and then be able to replace it with something new to take its place. Because you hit a great point, Sean. This is part of the culture of an agency. And when it becomes part of a culture of an agency where you have a permanent state that's hired, people who believe they can't be fired, that's the only answer that's actually left. Reform top down, even with a better U.S. Treasury Secretary, alone would not change the culture of that managerial rot. That's why it needs to be gutted.
And Vivek, these agencies are so large, and with the IRS adding an additional 87,000 new agents and employees alone. And at the very top of the show, we said Biden's government, that Taibbi exposed Twitter's ties to Biden's government. It wasn't Biden's government. That was wrong. It was the FBI and other people before Biden was even elected. But that goes to your point, that these people never go away, and they potentially take it upon themselves, that there's one individual, one rogue, that these agencies are so big and vast that they are uncontrollable and unmanageable and can do untold amounts of damage.
That's exactly right. And they may eat their own in the end, which may even be President Biden if he continues to persist with this run. We shall see. But the deeper problem is, look, I have a dream as a citizen, okay, that the people who we elect to run the government are actually the people who run the government. Even if they're the ones I disagree with, I'd rather it be the ones who the people who actually of this country actually elect. That is not the case today. And we have these civil service protections passed by Congress years ago that say that supposedly these people can't be fired. I think we need to replace those civil service protections with 8-year sunset clauses, 8-year term limits for these federal bureaucrats, to say that if the next duly elected president of the United States, if I can't collect a paycheck from the federal government for more than 8 years, which I believe is a good thing, then I don't think most of the people working for me in the administrative state should either. That's how we keep the lifeblood of these institutions fresh. It's still J. Edgar Hoover's FBI and effectively a similar culture that's now, I would say, permanent at the IRS as well. Gutting it is the only answer, and I think it's going to take an outsider to actually do it, because you can't do it if you're a product of that same system.
So, Vivek, I would agree with you. It's going to take an outsider who's going to get rid of the status quo, which is the deep state. I got to tell you what, I disagree with you. These are very complicated agencies, and government is complicated. It should be easier and simpler, but 8 years, it took Paul Ryan 12 years to write The Pathway to Prosperity. I think to have some people with knowledge in departments is okay. But if they're not going to follow the directive of the elected president, you should have the right to fire them. If you're not going to do it, if it's President Vivek Ramaswamy, if you're not going to follow his directive, I'm sorry, you're gone. You don't get to work against the duly elected president to undermine that president, and you're unelected.
Yeah, and I bring a private sector understanding of the Constitution. I did have a life as a constitutional scholar as well, but speaking as a former CEO, if somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means that actually they don't work for you.
That's right.
It means you worked for them, actually.
That's 100%.
And that's the relationship between the U.S. president and the administrative state. You see it in the Biden administration. It's every bit as true.
And with the IRS, Matt Taibbi, he's a well-known individual. He has allies who, we're not friends with him, but we have voices, we wear microphones. It's everybody else out there who can't fight back, who could potentially be bankrupted by the weaponization of this agency. It's happened before, and it'll happen again unless somebody steps up to do something about it. Vivek, Attorney General Merrick Garland pressed by senators on whether the recent school shooting in Nashville would be treated as a hate crime against Christians. Listen to this.
I realize that the shooter is dead, but the shooter could have had collaborators. Do you plan on opening a hate crime investigation for the targeting of Christians?
As of now, motive hasn't been identified, and the police chief said at his last press conference that they don't yet have reached a conclusion with respect to motive. We are certainly working full-time with them to try and determine what the motive is, and of course, motive is what determines whether it's a hate crime or not.
Your reaction to that, Vivek, of investigating this murder as a hate crime?
So the first thing I will say is I've always been against the existence of hate crimes as a category. A heinous act is a heinous act, and I've always, on principle, believed that we shouldn't have special categories that we call hate crimes. However, to the extent that we do have hate crimes, I think we have to apply those standards even-handedly. And there is little doubt in my mind, if this had been a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist who went into a, say, meeting of trans people and shot up several of them, this would absolutely be investigated as a hate crime. Turn the tables, you can't apply a different standard either. So though I'm personally against hate crimes, I think if you're going to have them, you have to apply those standards even-handedly. And unfortunately, this Justice Department under Merrick Garland, under Joe Biden, is as politicized as it gets. You mark my words, I heavily doubt that they will actually apply that standard evenly.
I think you're right, Vivek. Okay, let's say you're president of the United States and you have a bill come to your desk that's going to ban social media for kids under 16. I'll just tell you, we assigned that bill because I'm a dad of 9 kids, and I'm telling you what, this is a scourge on the youth of America, and it's really hard for parents to manage. It's a challenge, but I think every parent who pays attention to their child would recognize social media is not a product for good. It actually has separated the child and the parent and brought ideas into their minds that are not the same values that the parents represent.
Absolutely. So I actually want to be clear. Protecting children, I think, is a key objective. It's a key policy plank for me. And it's a matter of consistency. If you say you can't smoke an addictive cigarette by the age of 18 or have an addictive drink of alcohol by the age of 21, this is actually doing far more damage to preteens and teens when you use addictive social media products by a 12-year-old or 13-year-old. So under the age of 16, addictive, algorithmically powered social media absolutely should not be used by somebody under the age of 16. And I go further. I say the same thing when it comes to genital mutilation or when it comes to puberty blockers or chemical castration for kids under the age of 18 either. If you can't get a tattoo by the age of 18, which is the law of the land in all 50 states of this country, because you don't want to make a life-altering decision that you will later regret as an adult, we shouldn't allow kids to engage in that form of genital mutilation as part of gender-affirming surgery either. This is part of a broader policy vision of unapologetically protecting children, because children aren't the same as adults. And even if you're a libertarian for adults, fine, that's a separate debate. But for kids, you can't apply those same set of rules. I say that as a father, too, unapologetically.
Can you win running on banning social media for kids under 16? I guess it would make...
It's part of my platform. It's not a signature issue.
Well,
but
I know, but...
16-year-olds don't vote, you're fine. You go right on with that.
I know. Well, I'm sure some Democrats out there have made sure that some 16-year-olds can vote. But based on your conversations, is this something that the voters want?
I think that I've actually been surprised, Dagan. So one thing that's true about my campaign is I've pledged this since the beginning, and I'm staying true to it. I would rather speak truth about my views at every step and lose this badly than to play a game of snakes and ladders of what you're supposed to say and somehow find a political victory on the other side of it. That being said, so far, I'm finding that's actually a pretty good strategy, because what I'm discovering is many of the things that I'm saying, where I'm the only person saying it and people might have questioned the political wisdom of it, we're actually seeing audiences in droves in places like Iowa and New Hampshire flocking to that message. And I think people recognize that it's not 1980 anymore, okay? You know, the dogmas of 1980 don't apply to the unique challenges that we face in the year 2023. And I think this trend of gender-affirming surgeries in children, of genital mutilation, of chemical castration, through puberty blockers, yes, the rise of addictive social media, those are unique trends in the year 2023. And so we need to wake up and unshackle ourselves from just reciting old slogans to actually wake up and address the true threats that Americans, and especially young Americans, face today, and do so boldly and without apology. And so my sense is, I haven't done the polling on it, but just from the audiences I speak to, people are galvanized by this message, and especially the authenticity and the fearlessness of somebody who's actually willing to deliver it.
And the social contagion that the social media creates among young people that pushes particularly young girls, even preteens, towards transgenderism. So it's all
Absolutely.
inextricably linked.
And that's why I think that message actually works, Vivek, with parents who actually vote. You're right. I want to move on, though, because Elon Musk and more than 1,000 top AI researchers signed on to a letter calling to pump the brakes on artificial intelligence experiments, warning they potentially risk the future of society. As the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, he had this warning. Watch this.
Are we close to the computers coming up with their own ideas for improving themselves?
Yes, we might be.
And then it could just go fast.
That's an issue, right? We have to think hard about how to control that.
What do you think the chances are of AI just wiping out humanity? Can we put a number on that?
It's somewhere between 0% and 100%.
Okay, so
I think it's not inconceivable.
Okay.
That's all I'll say.
Vivek, I asked a technology expert, a professional, about this letter, and the person's response was one word: China. Yes, please, let's pause our pursuit of AI so China can catch up or even get ahead and destroy us.
So here's actually, you put your finger on an important pulse. It comes back to China in a different way. I started my career actually studying molecular biology. Okay, that's what my academic background was in originally. This reminds me of the debate about banning gain-of-function research. Think about this, right? It was a form of research that was supposedly supposed to help humanity, as we now know likely contributed to gain-of-function research that created a global pandemic. By the way, we're lucky that it was only something as bad as COVID rather than a far worse virus or deadly virus that could have been created the same way. And you know what happened? China came into the picture again over there, where in the U.S. you banned it. Well, guess what? You had rogue actors in the U.S. who then funded it through the EcoHealth Alliance that found its way to the lab in Wuhan, China. But China didn't ban it. And that's exactly where it got done. So in a certain sense, you put your finger on the right pulse there, Dagan, is that while I think these guys have done a service in spawning a conversation through writing this letter, that's not going to actually result in even the course of action that they would recommend. Just look at even the federal ban on gain-of-function research. And so what I think we need to focus on now is start preparing human beings for the advent of that AI and to protect ourselves in whatever ways we can starting now. And the first is educating Americans on the fact that just because it's AI doesn't mean you have to bend the knee to it as a form of authority in what it says. Go to ChatGPT and ask about addressing climate change or addressing racial inequity. You get a response that sounds like a technical sounding authoritative response when it's actually just a political ideology in there. I think that's one of the first ways we can easily protect ourselves against AI is by training human beings, not the AI, but training humans not to see AI as a source of authority. That's one of many risks, but one of, I think, the easiest risks we can prevent. And I think that, you know, the gain-of-function research analogy teaches us about a lot of the futility of taking steps that actually just allow the same problem to come back through the vector of China itself.
Thank you, Vivek.
Good luck on the campaign trail. I know it's lonely and it's fun. Good luck, Vivek.
Thank you, Vivek
Thank you.
Ramaswamy.
Appreciate it, guys.